Some wounds do not come from strangers. They come from the people whose voices shaped your conscience, whose approval taught you whether you were safe, whose anger made you question your own memory, and whose religious language made you feel that protecting yourself was a sin. That is what makes narcissistic abuse inside a Muslim family so confusing. It may sit beside you at Eid, speak beautifully in public, quote Islam when it benefits them, and still leave you feeling small, guilty, watched, and spiritually exhausted. I want you to understand this carefully. Not every difficult parent is a narcissist. Not every selfish person has a personality disorder. When this pattern is persistent, when accountability is always rejected, and when the vulnerable person is trained to doubt their own perception, the damage can be severe, even if no bruise is visible. The spiritual damage is often the part no one sees. You may still pray, but salah feels like standing before another authority, waiting to be judged. You may make dua, but deep inside, you expect Allah to dismiss your pain the way your family did. You may confuse silence with sabr, emotional collapse with humility, and surrender to mistreatment with tawakkul. Let me say this clearly. Islam does not teach you to call oppression love. Islam does not teach you to deny reality in order to protect a family image. Islam does not command you to cooperate with sin, deception, or harm. We seek justice without allowing resentment to become a disease of the heart. Modern psychology may name the wound, but Islamic psychology asks what happened to the soul, what happened to the nafs when love became conditional, what happened to the qalb when fear entered the home, what happened to your image of Allah when a human being acted as though their authority was absolute. The wound is real, but it is not your final name. You are not only the child who was controlled, the spouse who was manipulated, the sibling who was scapegoated, or the relative who was never believed. You are a servant of Allah before you are a role inside a family system. It may be buried beneath fear, shame, and years of emotional confusion, but by Allah's mercy, it can still return to clarity. 1. Name the pain correctly. The first step is not forgiveness. The first step is not confrontation. The first step is not cutting people off. The first step is naming what happened with enough precision that confusion can no longer protect the pattern. They say, "My family is just strict," when what they mean is, "I am punished whenever I think independently." They say, "My mother worries too much," when what they mean is, "She controls my choices through fear, guilt, and emotional collapse." They say, "My father has a temper," when what they mean is, "Everyone in the house organizes their life around avoiding his rage." They say, "My sibling is difficult," when what they mean is, "I am constantly mocked, exposed, compared, and blamed." I am not telling you to diagnose people from a YouTube video. A clinical diagnosis belongs to qualified professionals, and many abusive patterns can exist without a formal disorder. What I am asking you to examine is the pattern. Do they demand loyalty while refusing accountability? Do they punish boundaries with rage, silence, threats, public shaming, or religious guilt? Do they treat your growth as betrayal because your independence weakens their control? When these patterns repeat, the central wound is not simply that someone was rude to you. The deeper wound is that your reality was colonized. You were trained to see yourself through the eyes of the most controlling person in the room. You absorbed an identity. This is why many Muslims from narcissistic family systems carry chronic shame. Shame says, "Something is wrong with me." Guilt says, "I did something wrong." Healthy guilt can lead to tawbah and repair. Toxic shame makes you feel unworthy of mercy before you have even examined the facts. It can make you fear displeasing people more than displeasing Allah. We need to separate Islamic duty from psychological domination. Honoring parents is a serious obligation. Maintaining kinship is a serious matter. Adab does not require self-erasure. At the same time, be careful not to turn the word narcissist into a shortcut that protects you from your own muhasabah. Sometimes you were harmed, and you also developed harmful responses. Sometimes the other person was controlling, and you learned to control. Naming the pain correctly means naming all of it. What was done to you, what it taught you, and what you may now be repeating. Islam does not deny emotional suffering. The Prophet's life contains grief, betrayal, rejection, loss, family complexity, and human pain. The Quranic view of the human being is not emotionally shallow. The wound is real, but it is not your final name. So name the pain with precision. Perhaps you were emotionally manipulated. Perhaps you were scapegoated. Name it, not to create hatred, but to stop confusion. A wound that remains unnamed often becomes destiny. A wound that is named truthfully can become the beginning of responsibility. Once you can say, "This happened, it affected me, and I need to respond before Allah with honesty," you begin to leave the prison of denial. It is the beginning of moral clarity. 2. What the nafs does when it is wounded. Once we name the pain, we need to understand what the nafs does with it. The nafs is not simply the ego in the casual modern sense. It is the self with its impulses, fears, appetites, defenses, habits, and capacity for moral struggle. It develops strategies to survive. One strategy is hypervigilance. You learn to read footsteps, facial expressions, pauses, breathing, and changes in tone. You become skilled at detecting danger before anyone says anything. Then you call this intuition, but sometimes it is fear repeating old information. Another strategy is people-pleasing. You become useful so that you will be safe. You solve everyone's problems, absorb their emotions, lend money you cannot afford, say yes when you mean no, and apologize before knowing what happened. It is emotional hunger wearing the clothing of kindness. Some people move in the opposite direction. They become controlling because control feels safer than vulnerability. They micromanage their spouse, monitor their children, dominate conversations, or demand immediate reassurance. Unexamined pain can make a person dangerous. The wounded nafs also uses avoidance. You avoid difficult conversations, decisions, family gatherings, marriage, intimacy, responsibility, or even worship, because each one activates shame. You may spend hours online, sleep excessively, chase entertainment, overeat, use pornography, enter haram relationships, or become addicted to fantasy. Return requires courage. Anger is another response. Some anger is morally meaningful. It tells you that a boundary was crossed, a trust was violated, or injustice occurred. At that point, the original injustice is still wrong, but the nafs has started feeding on resentment. Then there is self-pity. I want to be careful here because wounded people are often accused of self-pity when they are simply trying to speak. But genuine self-pity exists. The person who hurt you may no longer control your daily life, but your wound still controls your direction. Nafs al-ammara, the self that urges toward wrong, can use the wound as justification. It says, "You were deprived, so take whatever comfort you want. You were controlled, so no one can tell you anything. You were shamed, so every emotional reaction must be defended." Islamic psychology does not shame the wounded person, but it also does not flatter the wounded nafs. Nafs al-lawama, the self that reproaches itself, can appear in a healthy or distorted way. Healthy self-accountability asks, "Where did I go wrong? What must I repair? What does Allah want from me now?" Distorted self-blame says, "Everything is my fault." Humility submits to truth, not to false blame. This is why muhasabah must be guided by justice. When you examine yourself, do not copy the voice of your abuser. Do not ask, how can I prove I am worthless? Ask, what belongs to me and what does not? What grief needs space? That is accountable self-reflection. You may also develop attachment to emotionally unavailable people. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. You choose friends, spouses, teachers, or leaders who make you chase approval because your nervous system recognizes the pattern. You call it chemistry, but sometimes it is repetition. Comparison can become another wound. In narcissistic families, children may be ranked. One becomes the successful child, one the difficult child, one the invisible child, one the family rescuer. But even success can become bondage when your entire life is an argument with people who refuse to see you. The goal is not to destroy the nafs. The goal is tazkiyah, purification, training, and proper ordering. Your fear needs truth. The self must learn that survival strategies are not permanent identities. So when you notice a reaction, do not only ask, what am I feeling? Ask, what is my nafs trying to obtain or avoid? Is it seeking control, approval, revenge? It gives you power over what the pain is becoming. 3. How the qalb becomes covered. The qalb is not merely emotion. In Islamic understanding, the heart is a center of perception, intention, moral awareness, spiritual receptivity, and turning. It is called qalb because it turns and changes. A person may know religious information and still use it to serve pride, control, or denial. When narcissistic abuse happens in a Muslim family, the qalb can become covered in several ways. The first covering is fear. If authority in your home was unpredictable, you may transfer that image onto Allah. You may even worship with the hidden belief that Allah, like the controlling person, is waiting for you to fail. Let me say this carefully. Allah is not a magnified version of the person who hurt you. Human authority is limited, accountable, and often corrupted by the nafs. Allah's lordship is perfect. When a family member uses religion to control you, that does not make them a representative of Allah's character. It makes them a human being misusing sacred language. The second covering is resentment. Repeated injustice can make the heart heavy. You remember every sentence, every humiliation, every time the family protected the powerful person and blamed the wounded one. You are physically standing before Allah, but emotionally standing before the person who harmed you. The third covering is ghafla, heedlessness. Pain can produce spiritual avoidance. Some people assume that a wounded person will automatically become closer to Allah. It means your heart is tired and has learned to avoid what it associates with danger. The fourth covering is false belief. You may believe that love must be earned through usefulness. You may believe that disagreement is disrespect. These beliefs can sit inside the heart for years because they sound religious while producing injustice. Islamic scholarship has always made distinctions. Sabr is not passivity. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. A person may preserve basic kinship without returning to an unsafe level of intimacy. The fifth covering is self-hatred. If you were repeatedly told that you were difficult, selfish, ungrateful, or spiritually defective, those accusations may have become your inner speech. Eventually, the abusive person does not need to be present. You call this humility, but it is not humility to despise what Allah created. Humility means you do not worship yourself. It also means you do not pretend you are outside Allah's mercy. Self-hatred can contain a hidden form of self-occupation. Tazkiyah sees the nafs honestly, disciplines what is corrupt, thanks Allah for what is good, and never claims independence from divine mercy. The qalb may also become defensive. You stop receiving advice because correction feels like control. You interpret questions as accusations. A wall built against one harmful person can eventually block everyone. Classical Muslim thinkers wrote about the relationship between thoughts, habits, bodily states, spiritual conditions, and moral character. They did not reduce the human being to one dimension. They understood that grief can affect the body, that repeated action shapes character, that companionship influences the heart, and that diseases such as envy, pride, ostentation, anger, and heedlessness can distort perception. The heart is affected by what it repeatedly sees, hears, remembers, desires, and practices. But I want you to hear the hope in this. A covered heart is not a destroyed heart. A heavy heart can become lighter. A numb heart can begin to feel. A heart that associates religion with control can slowly rediscover Allah through sound knowledge, sincere worship, safe companionship, and honest dua. Do not demand instant spiritual emotion from yourself. You may pray and feel nothing. Pray with truth anyway. It is turning toward Allah with the condition you actually have. The world may call you broken, but Islam says your fitrah is still alive. The covering is not the essence. The heaviness is not the identity. That is why despair is never the final Islamic conclusion. 4. Why modern advice often feels incomplete. Modern psychology has given many people language they desperately needed. It can help identify manipulation, trauma responses, attachment patterns, emotional dysregulation, coercive control, and the effects of chronic stress. A competent therapist may help you test distorted beliefs, regulate your body, process grief, communicate more clearly, and make safer decisions. Wisdom and benefit should be recognized with honesty. But modern advice often feels incomplete because it may stop at the psychological self. It may help you ask, what happened to me? What do I need? How do I protect myself without becoming what harmed me? This is where modern psychology often stops. It may name the wound, but Islamic psychology asks what happened to the soul. It may help you become more functional, but Islam asks what kind of person you are becoming. It may emphasize boundaries, but Islam places boundaries inside a wider moral world of rights, duties, intentions, consequences, kinship, repentance, and accountability before Allah. Some popular self-help advice tells wounded people, cut off anyone who disturbs your peace. That sounds powerful, but it is too crude. Some people disturb your peace because they are abusive. Some disturb your peace because they tell you a truth your nafs dislikes. Wisdom is not a slogan. Other advice says, you owe nobody an explanation. Sometimes that is useful. Endless explaining can be a trauma response, and controlling people often demand explanations they will never accept. But sometimes you do owe an explanation. Islamic psychology does not replace domination with individualism. Then there is the language of protecting your energy. This may describe a real need to manage emotional capacity, but the phrase can become morally vague. Islam gives more precise categories. Is this person violating a right? The Islamic framework asks not only what feels draining, but what is true and responsible. Modern culture can also turn healing into self-worship. The person begins with a legitimate need for safety and ends with the belief that personal comfort is the highest law. Any inconvenience becomes toxicity. It is the Nafs learning therapeutic vocabulary. At the same time, Muslim communities can commit the opposite error. They can use religious vocabulary to erase psychology. They tell the abused person, just have sabr. They say, do not expose family matters. They insist, a parent is always a parent, as though the sentence solves every case. They may ask the wounded person to carry all the consequences, so that the family system does not have to change. Let me say this clearly. Sabr is not the refusal to act. Sabr is disciplined steadfastness upon what is right. Sometimes sabr means enduring what cannot yet be changed. Sabr is active moral strength, not passive disappearance. Tawakkul is also misunderstood. Tawakkul does not mean remaining accessible to someone who repeatedly harms you while refusing every practical means of protection. You lock the door and rely upon Allah. Taking lawful means does not weaken tawakkul. Treating those means as independent from Allah does. Therapy may be useful, but not every therapist will understand your religious commitments, family culture, or moral framework. Some may push a model of autonomy that ignores Islamic duties. Others may underestimate abuse because they are unfamiliar with religious manipulation. We need intellectual humility across disciplines. Likewise, a diagnosis can explain behavior, but it does not answer every moral question. A person may have a disorder and still be accountable according to their capacity and circumstances. A person may not have a disorder and still act oppressively. Those decisions require context, risk assessment, Islamic guidance, practical wisdom, and often professional support. Islamic psychology also includes the unseen dimension of the human being without turning every problem into jinn, evil eye, or weak iman. Waswasa is real, but not every intrusive thought is only waswasa. Spiritual harm is real, but not every panic response is a sign of possession. We must reject both material reductionism and spiritual superstition. The complete view is not therapy or Islam. The complete view is that the human being has a body, mind, nafs, qalb, relationships, habits, environment, moral responsibility, and a relationship with Allah. Healing may involve sleep, nutrition, movement, medication, therapy, legal protection, financial planning, sound Islamic knowledge, repentance, dhikr, salah, companionship, and time. No single tool should be made into an idol. What you are seeking is not merely relief from symptoms, you are seeking a truthful self before Allah. You want to know how to grieve without drowning, how to protect yourself without becoming cruel, how to forgive without lying, how to honor family without enabling oppression, and how to rebuild worship after sacred words were used against you. The path of healing must be wide enough to hold all of that. 5. The Islamic path of inner healing. The Islamic path of healing begins with truth before Allah, not performance, not pretending that you are fine. Allah already knows, but dua trains the heart to turn toward Him rather than circle endlessly around the abuser. Then begin muhasabah. Write down the patterns without exaggeration and without minimizing. What happens before conflict? Which accusation immediately collapses your confidence? What belongs to your responsibility, and what are you carrying for others? Muhasabah is examination for the purpose of correction. You may discover sins of your own. Perhaps you lied to avoid punishment. Perhaps you became harsh with a spouse because you were never allowed to express anger at home. Tawbah is how you refuse to let another person's sin become the author of yours. Make tawbah specifically. Do not say only, Allah, forgive everything, while protecting the habit. Name what you can name, stop what you can stop, and repair what you can repair. Tawbah restores agency. It allows you to say, I was wronged, but I can still return. Then, restore salah as a place of truth. Some people from controlling religious homes experience prayer mainly as pressure. They rush, dissociate, or feel nothing. When you bow and prostrate, let the body learn that surrender belongs ultimately to Allah. Dhikr is also essential, but do not use it as a sedative that avoids reality. Dhikr is remembrance. It restores proportion. The aim is to retrain the heart's orientation. You also need boundaries. A boundary is not an attempt to control another person. It is a statement of what you will do in response to a behavior. Their anger does not automatically make the boundary wrong. However, boundaries must be realistic. Do not announce 10 dramatic rules you cannot enforce. Start with one clear limit. Explain what is necessary with adab, then act consistently. Sometimes low contact is enough. Sometimes structured contact is needed. Sometimes a mediator can help. If there is immediate danger, prioritize safety and contact appropriate local support. Changing the environment is part of healing. The heart is affected by repeated exposure. If every day contains humiliation, surveillance, or chaos, your inner work will be harder. Sometimes the room, schedule, phone, money, and living arrangement must change. Good companionship is crucial. Narcissistic systems isolate. They teach you that nobody will understand, that outsiders are dangerous, or that family reputation must be protected at all costs. Find people who do not feed hatred, but also do not deny reality. Such companions help you think, worship, regulate, and act with integrity. Service can help restore the soul, but only when it is not another form of self-erasure. Serve Allah's creation from choice and balance. Help someone without needing them to need you forever. Healthy service teaches the wounded nafs that generosity can exist without fear. Discipline matters because healing cannot depend only on mood. Sleep at a reasonable time. Move your body. Insight without practice becomes another form of escape. Sabr is required because you may not receive the apology you deserve. The family may never admit what happened. They may rewrite your boundary as betrayal. You continue upon truth even when they misunderstand you. Tawakkul means you stop treating the outcome as your God. You take wise action, then release what you cannot control. You cannot control whether they change. It is active reliance on Allah while you become responsible. Forgiveness may come, but do not counterfeit it. Forgiveness is not denial, trust, access, or the absence of consequences. It is possible to release the demand for personal revenge while still seeking justice. Work toward a clean heart, but do it through truth. The Islamic path is not one dramatic breakthrough. It is a series of returns. You notice the old fear and return. Healing of the nafs happens through repeated, humble return to Allah. 6. What you must stop feeding inside yourself. Now I need to speak to you directly, because healing is not only about what others must stop doing, it is also about what you must stop feeding inside yourself. This does not excuse the abuse. It means that your future cannot remain entirely organized around another person's wrongdoing. First, stop feeding the need to be finally understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. This need can consume years. You explain more clearly, provide more evidence, choose softer words, wait for the perfect moment, and imagine that one final conversation will produce accountability. Wisdom is knowing when clarification has become self-abandonment. Second, stop feeding the inner courtroom. Your mind may replay scenes because it is trying to create justice after the event. You imagine what you should have said and prepare answers to accusations that have not happened. Use reflection to learn, then tell yourself, I have understood enough for this moment. I will return to what Allah has placed in front of me. Third, stop feeding resentment as though it proves loyalty to your own pain. Some people fear that if they let go of anger, they are saying the abuse was acceptable. That is false. Resentment promises strength, but over time, it makes the abuser the center of your inner world. Fourth, stop feeding the victim identity. You were victimized in particular moments or patterns. That statement may be true. The Islamic path does not deny what happened. It refuses to let it become the highest truth about you. Fifth, stop feeding haram comfort. Loneliness and family pain can make forbidden relief feel justified. You may seek secret relationships, pornography, substances, compulsive spending, gossip, revenge, or emotional dependency. Your wound deserves care, not another chain. Sixth, stop feeding self-hatred. You may have made serious mistakes. Make tawbah, repair what you can, and accept consequences where required. But do not confuse accountability with humiliation. Arrogance can prevent return, and hopelessness can prevent it as well. Seventh, stop feeding comparison with the favored sibling, the praised cousin, the apparently perfect family, or the person who received the love you wanted. Comparison keeps you emotionally inside the same hierarchy. You may spend your life trying to prove that you are more successful, more religious, more attractive, more generous, or more needed. Your measure is whether you are becoming truthful and obedient before Allah. 8. Stop feeding spiritual laziness disguised as exhaustion. There are days when you are genuinely depleted. Rest is not laziness. Begin small, but begin. 9th, stop feeding the fantasy of changing them. You may pray for their guidance, speak truth, suggest mediation, or offer a path to repair. But you cannot perform tawbah on another person's behalf. Your task is to respond to reality with wisdom. 10th, stop feeding arrogance that grows from psychological awareness. Once you learn words like narcissism, trauma bond, gaslighting, attachment, and projection, you may start analyzing everyone. You become the only self-aware person in the family, and everybody else becomes a diagnosis. Islamic psychology requires humility, because only Allah knows hearts completely. You must also stop using boundaries as punishment. A boundary protects what is necessary. Punishment tries to control another person through deprivation. Are you protecting peace and obedience, or trying to produce power? Stop making forgiveness a performance as well. Some wounded Muslims announce forgiveness because they fear judgment, but inwardly remain full of rage. Others refuse even the possibility of forgiveness because anger has become identity. But you should not deliberately cultivate hatred. Stop expecting healing to make you unaffected. You may still feel sadness at family gatherings. A certain phrase may trigger fear. You can notice pain, regulate yourself, seek Allah, make a wise choice, and continue. Emotional responsibility means you do not blame yourself for another person's abuse, but you do take responsibility for your response, your treatment, your worship, your relationships, and your choices. This is not harshness, it is dignity. They do not have to own your final character. Ask yourself regularly, what am I feeding? Every thought is not chosen, but attention can become nourishment. Every emotion is not sinful, but repeated indulgence can shape the heart. Feed hope in Allah. You do not heal by pretending the darkness was light. You heal by refusing to carry the darkness into every room you enter. 7. Returning to your fitrah. Beneath the adaptations, beneath the fear, beneath the shame, beneath the role your family assigned to you, there is a fitrah that still recognizes truth. Fitrah is not a childish fantasy that you were born with a fully developed personality untouched by life. It is the original orientation toward Allah, truth, moral recognition, and the capacity to receive guidance. It can be covered, distorted, neglected, and pressured, but it is not easily erased. This matters because narcissistic abuse often attacks your sense of reality. You are told that what hurt did not hurt, that what happened did not happen, that your need for dignity is rebellion, and that the powerful person's feelings define truth. Over time, you may lose confidence in your own moral perception. Returning to fitrah means rebuilding the ability to recognize truth without making the self absolute. You begin to learn that peace is not the same as keeping everyone pleased. Sometimes you feel anxious precisely because you are doing something healthy and unfamiliar. Saying no may feel wrong, before it feels safe. That does not mean the truth is false. Returning to fitrah also means rediscovering Allah beyond the distorted religious image you inherited. Perhaps religion in your family was mainly reputation, obedience, gender control, comparison, fear, or public appearance. Perhaps Quran was recited in the house while people were humiliated in private. The medicine was contaminated by the hand that delivered it. The medicine itself is not the poison. Learn your religion again with trustworthy sources. Study Allah's names with balance. Learn about mercy without denying justice, and justice without erasing mercy. Sound knowledge separates Allah's command from family custom. Your fitrah also needs safe human relationships. Healing is not achieved by declaring that you need nobody. That statement may feel strong after betrayal, but human beings were created relationally. Healthy relationships teach the nervous system and the heart that closeness does not always require self-loss. You may have to learn ordinary things slowly. How to state a preference without an essay. How to receive a compliment without suspicion. These may seem small, but they are signs that the self is returning to proper proportion. The fitrah does not tell you to worship independence. It teaches dependence upon Allah and responsible interdependence with people. You are not meant to become unreachable, cold, or proud. An anchored person can love without begging, serve without disappearing, forgive without lying, and leave a harmful situation without needing revenge. This return requires tazkiyah. Tazkiyah is not merely feeling spiritually clean. It is the long work of removing what corrupts and nurturing what Allah loves. You remove despair and nurture hope. Your fitrah is also restored through halal joy. Some wounded people know how to survive, but not how to live. They feel guilty when they enjoy food, nature, friendship, marriage, creativity, or rest. You are allowed to create new family patterns. Do not rush to prove that you are healed by returning to the same environment without protection. A wound closing does not mean you deliberately reopen it. Wisdom may require distance for a long time. Hope in Allah does not mean naivety about patterns. At the same time, remain open to genuine change. Some people do repent. Some families improve when consequences become real. Tears, promises, religious language, illness, or temporary kindness are not by themselves proof of transformation. And perhaps the person never changes. Then your return to fitrah becomes even more important. You stop postponing your life until they become capable of giving what they withheld. You can mourn what was missing while thanking Allah for what remains possible. The world may call you broken, but Islam says your fitrah is still alive. You are not permanently contaminated by another person's character. You are not doomed to repeat your family system. You may carry tendencies, fears, and learned behaviors, but awareness, tawbah, support, discipline, and divine mercy can change a human being. Your story may include years of silence, but it does not have to end in silence. It may include religious manipulation, but it does not have to end in distance from Allah. It may include shame, but it does not have to end in self-hatred. It may include anger, but it does not have to end in bitterness. Returning to fitrah is not returning to who you were before the wound. You may never become that person again. It is becoming someone more truthful after the wound, softer without being weak, firmer without being cruel, aware without being obsessed, cautious without being closed, and dependent upon Allah without surrendering your responsibility. The Nafs wants escape, but the qalb needs return. Return does not mean returning to the abuser. It means returning to truth, worship, moral clarity, and your place as a servant of Allah. It means the family system no longer defines the limits of your soul. I want to leave you with something serious. You may never receive public justice. The person who harmed you may remain respected. That is painful, but human recognition is not the final court. Allah knows what was said in private. He knows the fear you carried into sleep, the confusion you brought into salah, the apologies you gave for things you did not do, and the years you spent trying to earn ordinary kindness. He also knows where your pain has made you unfair, where resentment has entered, where you have neglected your duties, and where your nafs now needs discipline. That should give you both comfort and humility. Do not build your healing upon the fantasy that you were completely innocent in every moment, or that the other person was completely inhuman. Build it upon truth. They may have oppressed you, and you may still need tawbah for some of your responses. Seek protection, therapy, medical care, scholarly guidance, or legal support where each is genuinely needed. Taking responsible help can be part of tawakkul. Then keep returning. Return through tawbah when you fall. Return through salah when your heart is scattered. Return through hope when shame tells you that nothing can change. Do not ask only, how do I make the pain disappear? Ask, what can this pain become if I carry it before Allah correctly? Pain can become an identity, but Islam turns pain into purification. It can produce insight, justice, compassion, discipline, and a refusal to pass the wound to the next generation. You can become the person who ends the pattern without making hatred your religion. Your family may have wounded you, but they do not own your fitrah. They may have shaped your fears, but they do not control Allah's mercy. They may have taught you to doubt yourself, but truth can be relearned. They may have made worship feel heavy, but the qalb can turn again. The wound is real, but it is not your final name. Your final direction is still being chosen in every return to Allah. Purify the nafs, guard the qalb, seek truth without cruelty, safety without arrogance, and justice without becoming consumed by revenge. Trust that the one who created the fitrah knows how to bring life back to a heart buried beneath years of fear. You are not being asked to deny what happened. You are being called to ensure that what happened does not become the God of what comes next.